Hey, not bad for a mulligan to 6 on the play, is it? We've got 2-for-1 hand disruption as early as turn 2. We've got the most flexible removal spell in all of Premodern. And, to follow it all up, we've got one of the format's most powerful threats. Only one slight problem I see. We cannot cast our spells. GG, bud. Welcome, my friends, to another 10-minute deck tech, this one featuring White Rock, also known as Junk, Midrange, and Premodern, and this, like all other BGX midrange decks, I do love, and what sets it apart is that we are, as the intro endeavored to demonstrate, we are trading away some level of consistency and painlessness that is kind of taken for granted in a straight green-black rock deck, and we are kind of cashing that in order to avail ourselves of some very powerful white cards. So is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, I think so. At least it is not strictly worse. The viability will depend on one's meta, one's playstyle and preferences, and honestly, the White Rock decks have been trending lately as far as I can tell. That said, Green-Black Rock has been a format pillar of Premodern since almost forever. Certainly it's very, very powerful. That much is undeniable. So we're going to talk here about the pros and cons of splashing white into a deck that might not really need it, but can still benefit from it in some really unique ways. The first thing, my friends, to talk about is the elephant in the room, and no, I'm not referring to Call of the Herd, at least not yet. We've got to talk about that land base. 23 lands, and boy, are they painful. Again, comparing to Green-Black Rock, we have less utility, only 3 Treetop Village instead of 4, and even 3 is kind of pushing it in terms of our consistency and our color production, to say nothing of it entering the battlefield tapped. But still, Treetop Village, such a powerful mid-range tool, very difficult to leave home without them. But then from there, 2 copies of City of Brass, 3 each of Llanowar Waste and Caves of Koleos. On top of that, the full playset of Windswept Heath. It all adds up to a very painful experience, and you can totally forget about the prospect of playing these one-off colorless utility lands that you do see in the Rock, like Dust Bowl or Valrath Stronghold, to say nothing of really pushing the envelope into Mishra's Factory or Wasteland playsets. It's just not gonna happen here. Our lands cast our spells, and they bring the apes to the party, and that's about all you can ask from them. In terms of the basic lands, I've been on a real Portal kick lately. I think this Plains, which is a 2 of, is always a nice choice whenever you're playing a white-green X deck. The Forest is literally never wrong to register. This John Avon piece is amazing, and I think this Swamp from Romus really suits the color trio as a whole. So that is the land base. It is the Achilles heel of this strategy compared to BG Rock, no question about it. Another thing that kind of fits that bill, same energy, Birds of Paradise. This is a card that is a necessary evil to play. I've wanted to play without it, but I decided to follow the suit of more experienced pilots and begin my playtesting with the card, and it soon became apparent that you pretty much need it, unless you want to up the land count, but there's a lot of things that the birds do in terms of giving you that turn 2 Vindicate or turn 3 Ravenous Baloth, things like this, accelerating out of the gates, and also the mana fixing, just so important. But we all know that in a mid-range deck, we want to reduce our bad top decks. Not only is Birds a bad top deck, but it's something that pretty much always gets swept up by our best removal spell, Pernicious Deed. So, a necessary evil. Okay, so it's all been relatively negative thus far, has it not? Well, let me give you some compelling reasons to play white. First and foremost, Swords to Plowshares. This card is not only some of the very best removal in the format, it also has an exile effect, which is something that BG notoriously lacks. Is there such thing as too much removal? I would say no. And although removal alone would probably not be incentive to destroy our amazing land base and have to play stuff like Birds of Paradise, this is definitely a class above other options that you would normally play in BG, like Smother and Vendetta. Duress, of course, sees play everywhere, but why Duress over Cabal Therapy? Well, between our outs being so powerful, and between our X for 1s being so plentiful, you almost think that just duressing almost anything is good enough. You just have to 1-for-1 the opponent, slow them down a little bit, and get to that mid-game where we will find a way to take care of whatever the opponent's up to one way or the other. Therefore, duress with a higher floor but lower ceiling than Cabal Therapy seems like a better fit. That said, it is worth noting that Birds of Paradise can make itself a little bit more useful alongside Cabal Therapy under certain circumstances than it would otherwise be. So keep that in mind. Cabal Therapy, not in this list, but very playable, as always. Spectral Lynx is an underrated reason to splash white. This card is actually awesome. Protection from green with a 1-mana regen, 2 power on a 2-mana cat spirit. Definitely a really sweet one, although your flexibility with these 3 colors in terms of the threat suite is immense. What I would regard as non-negotiables all fall into these 2 columns right here. A Sylvan Library is a one-of, is definitely a slam dunk for me in most mid-rangey decks that can play it, even if they're not black-based. And Gerard's Verdict has got to be one of the biggest and most compelling reasons to splash white. You are talking about non-targeted 2-for-1 discard for 2 mana with a life gain potential attached to it. This card is absolutely backbreaking, and the reason that non-targeted is okay is because number 1, we do have targeted discard to lead with, and number 2, you're getting lands out of the opponent's hand some of the time, which is notoriously what can make even the best 1-for-1 discard spells the side of blackmail with. Gerard's Verdict, just total depletion mode. You love to see it. And speaking of depletion mode, Pernicious Deed, one of the most powerful effects in this entire format, one of the reasons BGX is on the map at all, needs no further elaboration, and Vindicate. This lets us double down on whatever strategy we're following. Is the opponent stumbling on lands after you verdicted a couple out of their hands and they got greedy? Vindicate whatever lands they have left. Are you destroying all of their creatures and they can't get their feet underneath them? Well, Vindicate might be a slow 1-for-1 removal spell, but it's still good creature removal. You got a troublesome artifact or enchantment you can't otherwise answer? Vindicate takes care of that, and also means we don't have to do goofy things like trying to main deck naturalize or disenchant, because Vindicate has just got us covered. The top-end threat suite is delightful, my friends. We've got 2-ofs, Blastoderm, Ravenous Baloth, both need no introduction from BG Rock lists, absolute all-stars. Baloth has even got synergy with Blastoderm. If you're about to fade out of existence, just sack it to gain 4. These are really overpowered threats for the format, trust me. And Exalted Angel at the top end. This card has been an all-star in Dead Guy Ale, Star Spangled Slaughter, everywhere else I've ever played her. Very much rewarding us for being in white as well. And Call of the Herd, I'd like to spend an extra little moment on this. My first reaction to seeing this is, well, that's a little bit weird, but I guess it makes sense because it's such a friendly casting cost in terms of the colors. And then I kind of went back on that and said, well, our real trouble with casting our stuff comes with needing white, black, and green all on turn 1, and then black-white on turn 2, and black-green on turn 3, and double green on turn 4, and so on. So Call of the Herd is really not that big a deal, so why don't we play a better threat in the slot? And then I went back again and said, you know what? We're not playing Recurring Nightmare, or Valrath Stronghold, or any of the other graveyard synergies that other mid-range decks normally play, no Grim Lavamancer or anything like that. So Call of the Herd is actually amazing if the opponent otherwise has no reason to attack your graveyard. It is just a really undercosted 2-for-1, and the Elephants have beaten down many a foe, make no mistake about it. Sideboard, as always, is much more customizable than the main deck, but shout out to Engineered Plague, always a big reason to play black. Disenchant and Naturalize split, cute against Meddling Mage, and white generally being a very good way to keep red decks down. Thank you for watching, my friends, and hot take, if this mana base wasn't so much worse, this might be the very best deck in the format. As is, it's still very, very viable, highly rewarding to play, and a must-have for any mid-range aficionado. Thank you again for watching, and take care, my friends. I hope to see you for the next 10-minute Deck Tech.